Okay, I think we're live. A couple seconds before this live started, realized that for whatever reason, I was not going to be able to live from my phone. So we kind of last second, this is the setup. So we'll see how this goes. But today I decided I wanted to go over my ins and outs for 2025, but specifically the Bookish edition. I know everyone's talking about right now ins and outs for like fashion or lifestyle, but why not do a fun little bookish approach to it? So, that being said, we're going to start with number one. And if you had the chance yet to watch my unpopular bookish icks and unpopular bookish opinions, I do cover a lot of these things there. But for my first out, we're going to start with outs because I like to finish on a positive note. The first out is spice being the standard for how good or bad a romance is. I'm so sick and tired of someone saying like that a romance book or a romantasy book that has romance in it isn't good because there was zero spice in it. That to me is like, if anything, I feel like it says a lot about the author if they can convince you the romance is real without any of that. So that's the first one. Then, second one, and this one, it bothers me more than it should, but we are throwing around the term enemies to lovers way, way too easily. And we really need to get stricter about what we're referring to as enemies to lovers. Thankfully, I'm seeing a lot more of people using the term rivals to lovers, which is a lot less extreme. But if you're telling me that, oh, this book is enemies to lovers, I need it to be like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Like they want to love each other, but they're like destined from birth to be enemies. Like that's the kind of enemies to lovers I need. Like they're both kings of or like they're both kings and queens of different kingdoms, and then they have to go against each other because they're mortal enemies, and then they end up falling in love. Like that's enemies to lovers. What's not enemies to lovers is workplace rivals, or also I've seen a lot of where they're just like competitors maybe, or just even disinterested. Those not That's not enemies to lovers. Let's stop counting that. That's out. The next one, and I never thought I'd have to say this, but this is apparently a thing. It's all over Book Talk, but dialogue only readers, there are people who very openly and proudly will just open up a book and they'll only read what's in quotations. So the actual dialogue. They will not read any stuff in between. First of all, how do you know what's going on? Second of all, that's something I cannot fathom. Like you're not reading the book. Like you're not. So that's out. If you're dialogue only reading, you're not reading the book. That's out. Then inspired by being an actual just straight up knockoff. I feel like I see this a lot with ACOTAR. A lot of people will advertise their book as ACOTAR inspired, and it's straight up just a knockoff of ACOTAR. I've seen this with a couple books. I I don't think there's anything wrong with saying your book is inspired by another one, but please make sure it's actually inspired by and not actually just a knockoff of that book. Then this one, actually, it bothers me more than it should. I feel like I've been saying that about every single one of these, but it's extra true about this one. I get it. Fourth one came out and the whole sprayed edges thing, like the sprayed edges were really cool for Fourth Wing when it was like the dragons on the side. And then there were some other books that they also did like special editions where you could get sprayed edges. Can someone please tell me, why are we just spraying the edges a solid color? Like just blue or purple or pink. Like at least have a pattern to it or have it make sense for the book. Like I've seen cute romance ones where like there's little hearts, but I've also seen ones where it's literally just like a solid color. And I'm like, why would I pay an extra $3 or $4 for frankly a cheaper looking book? Because when it's just one color, if you even just slightly scratch or dent those pages, like the paint rubs off or like it gets a weird kink in it and it just looks really cheap and bad. So Unless there's a reason for spraying the edges or you're spraying an actual pattern in it, I don't think we should be spraying edges. It's not good. It's not good. And then my last out, which kind of turns into an in, is that book talk, I'm over it. Like, I feel Book Talk did great things for the reading community. I do think that obviously, I don't think a lot of people would have read ACOTAR if it weren't for Book Talk, and Fourth Wing obviously blew up the way it did, and Powerless blew up the way it did. A lot of my favorite books I only heard about through Book Talk. So I'm not saying it's like a bad thing, but the dramification of books, and it's kind of ironic I'm saying this because 'cause I'm doing, like, an ins and outs video, but I feel like Book Talk has tried to, like, gatekeep a lot of things about the reading community, and it just feels like a very toxic environment, and I feel like you could say that about TikTok in general, but I don't love what Book Talk has done to the reading community. I also will never consider myself a book talker because what I see, and I get it, the reason why I never want to jump into it is I don't even want to be tempted to do it, is I see people often just making like content to throw out content because they need to make like a TikTok or two a day. So they'll be like, if you read this book, you should read this book. And that's the TikTok. And I've had a lot of people come to me and be like, I've read some books and I've absolutely hated them because they said, oh, if you love ACOTAR, that's the one they always love to use, I guess. But they're like, oh, if you love ACOTAR, you should read Divine Rivals. That is a horrible connection. Like, don't get me wrong. I gave ACOTAR a 5 star. I gave Divine Rivals a 5 star. I love both of those books. But in what world, if someone came to me and told me, oh, I loved ACOTAR, what should I read next? I would not recommend Divine Rivals next. So that's just, there's stuff like that where it's, yeah, that book talk, they're just trying to make content. And a lot of times the way they pitch books is just by straight up spoiling it. And also just the spicification of books is also not my favorite. But that being said, ooh, I almost whacked myself in the face with my mic. My first in, and I never thought I'd say this, but I'm gonna say it. Bookstagram. I personally don't love Instagram. I struggle to post on Instagram. It's not one of my favorite platforms, but the Bookstagram communities are actually the most amazing and most positive places. So, two off the bat that I'll recommend. One of them I actually went to college with her and she is so fun and she posts very like down to earth Bookstagram content. She's not going to like blow you up. That is A Court of Thorns and Ash. And then on top of that, I would highly recommend the Common Room shop. She also sells a lot of Bookish merch, but it's actually really cute stuff. So I highly recommend her as well. She does post a lot, but very aesthetic things, and she's really great if you love Harry Potter and the Massverse. Basically, all of my favorite books are the ones that she posts about the most, so I like her for that reason too. Oh, and then a third one. What JK Reads is also a girl that I went to college with. She's doing that one. And I'm not even just promoting these because I know these people, like they're actually really good Bookstagram accounts, but Bookstagram is just way more positive in general. And I feel like it focuses more on the community aspect, whereas Book Talk, it feels like a lot of book talkers are just focused on getting as many followers as possible, which I'm not saying that's not a thing in Bookstagram, but it doesn't like flavor every single post that you see. So, highly recommend Bookstagram. Then, can we please bring in all books in a series being the same size? I'm sorry, but ooh, everything's mirrored, so I'm backwards. These being two different sizes, criminal. My Once Upon a Broken Heart books, all being different sizes, criminal. Don't even get me started on Powerful. Like I get that it's a novella, but like why did we do that? Why did we do that? Those are such different sizes. I'm not a fan. That's why the book is hiding in the back, okay? It's okay if I don't see it. So I really like a new in is can we please like when we publish books also just make sure they all look kind of similar? That's an in for me. Next, more creative love interests. Now, I feel like you all know what I mean when I say the shadow daddy is kind of like the love interest in every single romantasy book right now. And I'm so sick and tired of that. Like Resand nailed it. let's move on. Like, I feel like every single book I read now, there has to be some morally gray man with dark, long hair with some sort of like shadow or firepower, and he usually has purple or silver eyes. And I mean, that's fine. But why is every single love interest in every single romantasy book like that now? It's almost to the point where even if the main character the FMC like is in a relationship or is talking to someone, the second I see a dark-haired man with shadow powers, I'm like, "Oh, okay, she's gonna end up with that guy." So it's making books a little more predictable than they should be just for the sake of getting on a trend. And I think I'll call it a trend. So an in is more creative love interests. Like maybe let's throw a blonde in there. Like really, if you really want to throw off a reader, this is a note to all authors. If you really want to throw off a reader, make the love interest blonde. No one will expect it. No one will see it coming. Then, second to last one for ins is let's stop. So I guess this is, I don't want to say it's an out because I want to take this on a positive note. Let's make an in allowing people to consider listening to audiobooks reading. I feel like this is people get a lot of shade for saying that they love reading. And then when people find out that they just listen to audiobooks, people get really, really mad about that. In my opinion, there are people who do not have full vision abilities and they can't see very well. So they are not able to read. Like their bodies do not allow them to read. So, are you going to tell that person that they don't love reading? No, the reading looks different for them. And for some people, they want to read, but maybe like they really struggle to stay focused. And so they can't really keep their eyes on the page. And audiobook is the only way they can stay focused and enjoy the book. Reading is a different experience for everyone. And I kind of wish we would chill out. And this is more of a book talk issue than anything. Like, let's chill out. I know some people get really mad when booktubers, like majority of the books that we read are audiobooks, if that's the case. So I try to be pretty transparent about whenever I do audiobook a book because I feel like people are a lot harder on people who are putting out content about reading if they're doing a lot of audiobooks and they want you to be upfront about that. So like I'll continue to be upfront about it, but let's not say that audiobook reading is not actually reading. So an in is audiobooks count. My last in, and this is something that's been in for me my entire life, and I'm hoping it will become like a more acceptable thing, but like rereading and rereading regularly. I don't know how many times I've reread the Harry Potter books. It's a lot. I don't know how many times. Actually, I do. I'm on my fourth reread, I think, of this book series, and I've reread Caraval. I plan to reread Once Upon a Broken Heart. I love to reread books, okay? I think this is something that needs to be a little more out there because naturally, my TBR is insanely long. I have a lot of books I want to read and not a lot of time to read them, okay? So I get like, I want to read more books than I have time in my lifespan to read all these books. But sometimes when you really, really love a book, like don't stress about the books you're not going to have time for. Just if you want to reread a book, reading is about enjoyment. So don't feel like you need to race the clock and read all the most popular books before they're no longer relevant. Read what you want to read, even if that means rereading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone 5 times in 1 year. Do that. That's good for you. Okay, that was all of the ins and outs that I had for like bookish ins and outs. So this was a shorter little live today, and I'm actually going to end it here. But thank you for joining, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of Bookmas.